Welcome to another episode of We Don't Die, where my goal is to give you evidence that although our bodies will disappear, we survive physical death. I'm your host, Sandra Champlain, author of the best-selling book called We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. Coming to us today from Sydney, Australia, we have my new friend, Phillip Kayrouz. Phillip is a spiritual counselor, psychic medium, a pranic healer, and has even studied psychotherapy. He has studied mediumship at the prestigious Arthur Findlay College in England and provides his clients with both intuitive counseling and evidentiary proof that our higher consciousness lives on beyond physical death. He provides these services in person, if you'd like to visit him in Australia, and also worldwide via Skype or the phone. And you can reach our friend Medium Phillip at his email address, which is thehappyspiritmediums@outlook.com, or as always, go to wedon'tdieradio.com, click on episode 135, and the links to him are right there. Phillip, welcome to We Don't Die Radio.
Hello, Sandra. Hello from all the way from Australia.
I know.
Yes, so you can hear me clearly, right?
I can hear you clearly. It's the magic of Skype. I love this. And we've been Facebook friends for I don't even know how long, not too long. But at the beginning, when I had just called you, you mentioned to me that we happened to be at the Arthur Findlay College this same week, last year in May.
We were, although I don't think we actually crossed paths and caught up. It was such an incredibly dynamic experience for me anyhow. And but I realised after having left that I've seen you. So, yeah, it was very exciting when we were able to communicate with each other for this interview to take shape. So
yeah, and I'd seen your picture on Facebook too, and I had that same feeling, but then, I might have looked at your face so many times on Facebook, who knows. But that's really interesting that we were there the very same week. Was that your first visit to the Arthur Findlay College?
So it was my first visit. I was quite nervous, and I was putting it off for about a year because it was on the other side of the world, but it was an incredible experience, as you would know, and met some phenomenal tutors and was able to take away so much learning and growth just from that 1 week. So I would highly recommend it to your listeners.
Yeah, and some listeners have not been on the show or heard the show before and have no idea what we're talking about. You want to just explain what the Arthur Findlay College is?
Sure. So the Arthur Findlay College is the leading college for psychic science, and it's a college that's aligned with the Spiritualist National Union, and it provides teaching and support for individuals who want to further their education with psychic science, mediumship, and I was really excited to have come across it, and I would highly recommend any individual that wants to experience learning and growth within a mediumistic, psychic space, I would recommend. For me, probably the best place to visit. Mm-hmm. If there was one place of learning, for me, that would probably be the greatest.
I agree. And you don't have to be a medium to go there. You just have to be there, go willing with an open heart and open mind. And it's amazing. I had a miraculous week myself, and I'm guessing you probably did as well.
Well, I did. And this is what has contributed my unfolding, really, and gets me into the beginning of my journey. I use the term I probably awoke or became aware of my spiritual path probably later in life than I've discovered some other people have. But for me, I was probably in my mid to late 40s. I had a series of losses, family members over a 2-3 year period that had passed, and I found myself not being able to get through each day, and as expected, I was consumed by grief, and having the traditional understanding of, having grown up in a Catholic background and working within the framework of what I understood to be that we would pass over and then we would go to heaven. it just didn't seem enough, and it felt like I needed to know that my mum at the time, that there was more and than just going to heaven, and that I could never hear her, see her, or just feel her around. So possibly like many of your listeners, I felt very much stuck in that moment, and life for me at that point seemed to stand still. So John Edwards was visiting Australia at the time, actually about 2 months after Mum had passed, and I had the courage to go up and visit John Edwards and be part of the audience.
Great.
And I received a reading, and it was the first reading I've ever received. And so when Mum had come through, I walked away from that experience thinking to myself, wow, there's clearly more to life and death than what I understood for a large part of my life. And really from that point, I now understand that what I did was I set the intention to be open to receive all that is and all that exists within this world and within the spirit world. Because the following 2 years, what occurred was, for me, my spiritual unfoldment, and the way that initially would manifest would be I would start to be awoken in the early hours of the morning. And for me, what I now know to be my guide, a spirit guide, was communicating through to me. And so a series of experiences started to occur with spirit that resulted in me outsourcing some further learning and some engagements that would help me understand what was occurring.
Phillip, can I ask you what kind of experiences happened in the early morning that you knew that there was a guide with you?
So after I'd gone to John Edwards, and I realised that for the following few months, I was being woken up, and I was hearing voices, and I was feeling that as though my arm was being touched in a way that was sort of just bumping me to wake me.
Oh, okay.
And so then I realised that after a few experiences that I sat up, and I had what was a lady sit in a chair. Now, the chair wasn't there in the physical, literal sense, but it was there in terms of my view when I woke. And so the lady spoke to me, and interestingly enough, she said to me, "You're very open. You need to get some help to understand how to close yourself up." And close myself up in terms of understand what was occurring to me. And I know now that it was spirit. So it was spirit that was wanting me to be aware of their presence. And so for me, yes, it was a little bit scary, but once I was able to make sense of the experience, a lot more started to unfold. And I have to say there was one particular experience that for me, it felt very much like an angel visitation. And I woke up, I was awoken. At the edge of my bed was this phenomenal deep blue energetic presence, and the light that radiated at the end of my bed really in essence woke me up. It was very translucent. And I just kept hearing the words, "I am here and you're okay." And the amount of love that radiated from that being that was present in my room, I knew at that point that however I choose to move forward from that day on, that I would be guided and supported in a way that I had never previously understood.
Wow.
So, yeah, for me that was quite big.
And how long ago was this? A couple of years ago or further?
Yeah, so it was a couple of years ago that the initial experiences started to occur. And for me, that then enabled a whole series of unfolding. And I realised that, throughout life, some people just exist in their life, and which I had done for a large part, and I wanted now to live. And so I went on a process of discovering how does that look and how do I live. So, yeah, and my journey began unfolding in the literal sense at that point.
It's exciting to hear on one sense, because I've spoken to so many people that were whether they were born seeing angels or they've had abilities ever since they remember, and to have it unfold within your life in your 40s, right, is great. So there's hope for anybody if your heart is interested, I believe anyways. Yeah.
Can I add as well, though,
Sure.
What became apparent for me was, as the unfoldment occurred over the last year or two, it was almost as though there was a knowing, there was a remembering that really presented itself. So as I started to discover terms like chakras or auric field or understanding spirit or soul, with that came an unfoldment of remembering. So it was almost as though I began to understand the distinction between what was me having this human experience and then what was in essence an unfoldment or a remembering of my soul and my spirit. And it took me a couple of years to really be able to today blend an existence in these two worlds. And so I feel incredibly fortunate to today be able to say that for me, I know that my soul is not what I have, but it's what I am. And I know that there are quotes that come quite frequently within the spiritual community, but there's a lot of substance to them that I'm able to draw reference to.
Mm-hmm. So are we a soul with a body or a body with a soul?
So we're a soul with a body, and the term that we are spiritual beings having a human experience is something that makes an enormous amount of sense to me today in my life. Mm-hmm. When I first started Facebook, there was often a term that I would come across saying, we think we're under the understanding that we're human beings having spiritual experiences. And truthfully, as someone that had religious faith, that was a very large part of my life. But as my unfoldment occurred, I now understood that we're a soul, spirit having the experience, again, which is a very common term within the spiritual community, but to actually hear it and embody it are two distinct different things. And so it became a very heartfelt, very heart-centered experience, and really a way for me to live my life moving forward. So I know that when I get up today, that I get up and I'm grateful not just to be able to live, but to actually to live and embody the soul that I am, and to do it with passion, to do it with love, and to do it with gratitude.
Wow.
Helps me really have this full experience and to why it is that I'm here.
Yeah, it's easy to forget, even as many interviews I do, that we're a soul having a human experience. So it's great to keep involved. And even you mentioned you listen to this show too, and I think that's awesome. Thank you for that. Phillip, what was your road to becoming a medium? Because that first experience must have been really something with John Edwards, with your mom coming through. And then from there, do you remember the next time you were able, was it another person doing a reading on you? Was it you being able to see someone else? What happened next in that journey?
Well, for me, it was about my grief was a driving force, to be quite frank. I was overwhelmed with such grief that, the issue of, I didn't want to end my life, but I definitely wasn't able to live it in any way that would have been fruitful. So when my mother passed, I felt grief in a way that wasn't really quantifiable. I couldn't make sense of it. But when I had the experience with John Edwards and this message came through, for me, it was just a hunger that I wanted to, I was driven. I wanted to hear Mum. I wanted to feel Mum. I wanted to see Mum. And then when I realised that the level of healing that I got through that exchange with Spirit and the love that was being given to me, that I felt that I really needed to find a way to be able to give that back. And I needed to find a way to be able to to be able to engage spirit and people that exist within this human world, and act really in essence as a medium to provide love and healing, because I was able to take away how that changed my life.
Yes.
And I felt this real pull that there was a purpose and a need for me to be able to provide and give that back. So I ended up getting a reading from Mavis Patilla.
Another great medium.
Yes, and then when Mavis was had read through Skype, and provided me with support and love as she does so eloquently, she had also let me know that that I too can do this work if this is how I choose to move forward. So I think sometimes in life, Sandra, it's not just about the awakening or the awareness that we have as individuals. I think that it's also about it being mirrored. And so for me, I've been really blessed that I've had the reading with John and then Mavis, and it was a really affirming experience. And so I got up and wanted to start to learn. And I was fortunate enough to locate a mediumship circle. And in Australia, there's this lovely lady named Imelda Penny, who I spent a year with in a mediumship circle, who provided an enormous amount of love and nurturing and support, but also a lot of practicing and a lot of practical mechanics to enable me to be able to understand what I was hearing, thinking and feeling, and really how to draw close to the spirit, how to engage spirit and feel the love and the warmth that comes through with that engagement.
Will you explain just a little bit about what a circle is? I know the term from going to Arthur Findlay, but others may not.
Sure. So a mediumship circle was something that I was not aware of, and I too did not understand what it was at one point. But a mediumship circle is we're a medium, and we'll provide a gathering of 2, 3, 4, possibly up to about a dozen people, and it would be a group of like-minded people that are really aware of being able to sense spirit, sense touch, or just also be intuitive, and they're aware that there's something more that sits within them that they really want to get in touch with. And a circle provides an environment, a very safe environment with like-minded people to receive a sense of guidance and also teaching. And I've been really fortunate that I was really nervous, but the first time that I went into a circle, and I was able to really be around like-minded people that weren't going to be full of judgment, and really in essence explain that, if this is what I'm feeling and what I'm sensing, that we can sit opposite each other and provide what we call readings. And so through the practice of being able to read the energies and the feelings that are being presented either from the person in front or from spirit, we're then able to build a framework on what that may mean, and then from that move forward and make better sense of what's happening to us. And so a circle is really a nurturing environment to allow that to unfold.
Philip, do you remember any of the first times that you saw something in your mind's eye or sensed something, and then you had the person say, yes, that was my mom or dad or brother, sister? Do you remember any of that experience?
Yes, I was. So I had quite nervously taken myself to a circle, and I was very fortunate. I sat in front of someone who had been as part of this circle for quite a few years, and they explained to me, just trust whatever you get, because for me, very early on, when these feelings and the connections start to present themselves, a lot of self-doubt kicks in.
Yes, I know that self-doubt.
Having someone in front of you that's incredibly nurturing and explaining that, you're not just hearing things in your head. It may very well be about, a spirit, a real person that is actually communicating for the purpose of healing and love. So having someone reaffirm that while it's happening is an incredible experience. So I sat opposite a lady at the time, and she was able to, I felt what in essence was her grandmother come through. And for me, my clairvoyance is quite strong. So I was able to explain how her lovely grandmother looked, and was also able to explain. She was taking me on a story, and the story was one where she was showing me the memory she's had with this lady that had sat in front of me. And the memory was quite specific because I know that most of us can grow up with our grandmothers and see them in the kitchens helping. In the mid-1900s, being in the kitchen was not uncommon for loving grandmothers who would love to bake. But, I was seeing a story unfold where this particular grandmother was speaking in a language that was foreign. And I understood it to be foreign because as sweet as she was with her communication, I couldn't understand it. But the communication was from heart to heart. And I was explaining to the lady in front of me that your grandmother's showing me the rolling pin, and she's explaining to me that she's waving the rolling pin at you, and it's really about hurry up, get to the kitchen, you need to help me, etc. And so a story unfolded in a way that resulted, was quite personalised, and it was about, the baking of a pie and the relationship around how that was a real memory that this beautiful lady had shared with her grandmother. And so through these readings, what became apparent to me in that first moment was that the evidence that was coming through was a real validation that life does exist after death, and not death as we know it, because it's really just a passing into another life. And so the We Don't Die, which is the title of your radio station, is absolutely truthful, because the evidence that came through in my first experience when I sat in front of this lady was what really validated to me that not only is this incredible grandmother that's still very much alive, still very much present with her personality, that the evidence that came through was also reaffirming that my mum was very much alive.
Yes.
That the people in my life that had passed actually had just passed over into another life of living. And so I would go to those mediumship circles for about a year, and every time I would go, I would sit, and the evidence that would come through would really just breathe more life into the life that I lived here. And so during that period for a year, I've come out of that experience getting up each morning and knowing it's life after life. And we're constantly alive, and we're in a process of living in every aspect of every minute, that we exist, not only this human plane, but also within the spirit world. So I sit here with a level of excitement that through the discovery of evidence in mediumship, that I know that, that life is continual. So everything I do here, I do now with a passion, I do with excitement. And that's something that I could say that I didn't experience prior to my 45 years of adulthood.
That's fantastic. And I'm sure it made a tremendous difference with your grieving process as well.
Yes, well, in ways it kept me alive.
Mm-hmm.
And through that experience, I know that I really wanted to be able to give back something to the wider community. And, and I know that, I suppose for me, what's one of the strongest ways to help someone through grieving is to actually being on the same path and walk that path. And so, my understanding is we can only take people as far as we've gone, and take in terms of holding their hand and helping them get through what may very well appear at times very cloudy and, can be quite depressing. So I hope that through this work of mediumship, that in my life here, that if I just touch one person to live their life in a way that they should, then I know for me now that my time here has been worthwhile.
And of course, it's going to be more than one.
Yes, and it would be more than one, and it
Yeah.
has.
At what point did you decide to start working with other people outside of the circle?
So confidence was a real challenge for me.
Uh-huh.
I found that the more I engaged, I suppose, people that were like-minded, and the more I understood the learning methodology of not just mediumship, but counselling and also energy, and understanding the value of everything is energy and its vibrational frequency. So the more that I took myself out to learn, there's a great awareness centre in Sydney, and it's at Crow's Nest, and there's a teacher named Rebecca who enabled me for about a year and to understand what I choose to use the word mechanics, but it's really about how to frame mediumship and the experiences that I'm getting into a way that I can then teach and become really a professional in as much as providing support and love as a counsellor and a medium. And so I would inspire people that there will be a point in their development to move beyond the self-doubt, to move beyond the doubt that is really a lot of the time not ours, but as we grow in life, I use the word, it's dumped on us and we tend to internalize it.
Yes.
But to have the strength to move beyond what we internalize as other people's doubts and judgments of self, and to do it with support, but we'll get to a point where we may very well need to go and outsource some courses or some additional teaching and learning. And I know in Australia we're incredibly blessed. There's a lot on offer here, but I also understand that even beyond the learning process within Australia, that the Arthur Finlay College, I was fortunate enough to go back in November, and from those experiences there, I've been able to bring back a lot of learning as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm going to visit again next May, which I'm excited about that.
That'll be very exciting.
Yeah, and I know just what you mean about the confidence, because I haven't gone on to practice, and it's the same thing. It's the confidence, never having been in a circle, and I know that's where I need to go is to, practice on caring people that are like-minded as well. So let's talk a little bit about energy. You brought that up a couple of times. Besides just studying mediumship and sitting in circle, did you do some work as to us being all made of energy, or what did you learn in that realm? What was your focus?
So one of the things that I was fortunate enough to learn was a form of energy healing called pranic healing. Pranic healing is, prana is an Indian term that refers to it's really life energy, and it's similar to chi. It's a means to source energy for the purpose of healing. And so I spent a year really trying to understand the auric field and understand chakras and the relationship that our actual energy body has to that. And what became apparent was that through understanding pranic healing, that I'm going to be able to harmonize and transform the body's energy process. And really the way I was able to do that was over the duration of a year to understand vibration and frequency. So we exist in a world where in essence everything is energy, and there's a lot of study that's done, a lot of science that explains that our own human body will vibrate at about 60 to 62 megahertz. And there's discussion about when we engage spirit, that that they will come in at about 500 to 1,000 megahertz in terms of frequency vibration.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
So what became apparent was that through some of the science and some of the new technology that's being used, that if everything can be quantified with energy and frequency, then really in terms of healing and engagement, that can also be done in a way where through vibration and frequency, if we can attune to to the frequency of another person, or if we can tune to the frequency of people being unwell, or the blockages that sit within us, that we can actually learn to heal the process, to heal what may very well be old patterns that sit within us. And so I discovered that a part of what I do is, when I'm working with a client, that I attune to not just the auric field, but I actually attune to the frequency and the vibration of the energy that the person sits in. And how I do that is through my psychic faculties. And I find that when I'm attuning to the energies that sit within the person and the frequency, that a lot of us, through the patterns and through the traumas we have experienced in life, we can be quite stuck and quite blocked. And sometimes there are experiences that we actually can't frame with words. So sitting with someone that's going to be able to connect through the heart and through attunement, there's a transfer of energy that takes place. In essence, it's primarily governed through love, but it's also for the purpose of healing, to enable a sense of unfolding a person's struggles that will unfold through an attunement. Yeah,
this is new to me, so I'm interested, and I don't know what to ask. Is this done through intention? A lot of it,
so for me, it's done through intention. So what ends up happening? Having sat in some seances in Australia with physical mediums, and also having learned mediumship and understanding of the vibration that we sit within, we need to raise. Having had the experience, we sit with Diane Parker in Australia that sits with trance. There's through the discovery of the last 2 years, I understand that depending on the modality of learning that one involves himself with, what ends up occurring is that there's a constant attunement to energy. So with evidential mediumship, there's a raising of vibration. As that vibration occurs, there's an attunement of not only with the sitter that's in front of you, but also an attunement to the spirit world. And that's governed by the vibration and the frequency of the people that sit in that space. So really for me it was, I took a step back from those experiences, and I just tried to make sense of how that then sits with me. How can I embody all of those experiences in a way that can provide healing and a sense of nurturing and direction within a counselling format? And so, yeah, that for me is what's taken me today to work with intuitive counselling.
This is very unique, I feel.
Okay.
Yes, I've spoken to a lot of people, and I just think, wow. So one can assume that your guides have been with you along the way, helping you have some of these thoughts and things, because this really sounds incredible. And I absolutely love how you explain the different megahertz. It's no wonder so many people say, why can't I feel my deceased father around or something? And if we're vibrating at 60 megahertz and the spirit world is 500 to 1,000, it's like tuning to a radio station that's on the other side of the world. We might not be able to do it in the beginning.
And it's an interesting point. So can I say that the experiences that I draw from, and there's an ownership over my personal experiences. Mm-hmm. So in terms of the spirit world, I sat in a physical mediumship workshop one weekend in Sydney, and throughout that process there was some great mediums during that process, and there was some technology that was able to measure during that workshop when clairvoyantly the mediums that were present were able to sense and attune to spirit. And so when that attunement would occur, it was usually when on the scanner that was being used, it would sit at about 500 to 1,000 megahertz. So when I reference numbers, I do it in a way that just from the personal experience, that technology that was being used. Now, I have read some literature from the that goes on and says that when within the spirit realm, that there's some theories that try to quantify the vibrational frequency that they may very well sit on, and there's suggestions that it's between 30 and 60,000 megahertz. Now, this is probably very new in terms of the technology that's coming out, where there's science that can actually start to measure and quantify vibrational frequency. And I think, the mediumistic community that does exist is that works with trying to engage the science supporting this. Everyone's coming up with their own personal discoveries. So for me, it was about the experience that I had with a group called the Wallachia Development Group in Sydney. And I know that there's quite a lot of experiments being done in that respect.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't know what to ask you yet next, Phillip. What should we talk about?
Okay. So, So
thanks.
Yep. We can talk about, I suppose for me then, what did I then do with that experience?
Great question. Mm-hmm.
So for me, then needed to be a greater purpose that all these lessons were presenting themselves. So I find in life, many of us will be challenged in life, and we often can find ourselves quite stuck. And I've learnt today in my life that what may very well feel like a place of being stuck is actually a place of transition where a new discovery is going to come through, and it's about being ready to embrace that. So my unfolding the last 2 years and the experiences that were quite personal to me has left me in a place today where, I'll use language like vibrational frequency, or I'll use language that, talks about being intuitive or engaging counselling in spiritual format. So what's occurred is the last 2 years, the learnings that I've taken on, but also the support and love that my guides are providing me and coming forward today in my life where I can feel their presence and hear them. It's almost as though I can, there's a moulding and a blending of those experiences to where now I can offer a degree of support to people that may very well be having similar experiences but not being able to make sense of them. Mm-hmm. And so for me it's about, so if I can empower people and allow a sense of healing and also facilitate healing, I feel that the struggles that may have been quite personal for me, but also the struggles and the learning that I've experienced in the last 2 years, I can now pass through and in a way that is really governed by integrity. Yeah.
I love how you said being stuck means a new discovery is to come. I mean, we've all had struggles and hard times, and you probably the same. You look back at some of the toughest times, and now, years later, we can say, but out of that tough time came this, or came something new, or came a new knowledge. So we might not see it when we're stuck in the struggle, but I really love that. New discovery is to come.
Yeah. And, I now learn in life as well that nothing ever comes too late. I suspect for me that, and this is to feed into the notion of being stuck, in periods in my life where I felt stuck, and I suspect many people may, and as they hear this, may very much feel stuck currently where they are. Mm-hmm. That it's all the experiences that I can now make sense of was really about enabling reference points for me to draw from. So, if I didn't have the experiences or the traumas that occurred within my life, I suppose the unfoldment of my soul and a sense of purpose may very well, I would be experiencing differently. So I suspect that everything has a purpose, and although it doesn't make sense, it may very well later in life, and it's completely reasonable to ask for help and reach out, and miracles happen. I would not have thought that I would be in my life today, have the awareness that I have, and so regarding the spirit world, regarding my own self-development and purpose. And so for me, I sit here today and I feel that I'm a miracle, and I get up, and every experience I have isn't a miracle. It is a miracle. So I think it's important for people to hear that as well.
Well, and that it's possible to wake up each day thinking it's a miracle and in gratitude. What was your career field before you got into this?
So I still currently work, but I've worked in corporate agricultural industry. So for me, a large part of what I did was working with produce and engaging farmers and getting an understanding of the chemicals they use, the farming cycles that they're involved in, the harvesting, the volumes, so that retailers can then source good farmed produce and then on-sell it to the wider community.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow, what a life. Now, I feel a little jealous of the relationship you have with your guides. We've spoken about guides before on this show, and I know we all have them, but is there a practice that we, the listener, myself included, can put in to maybe have a connection with them? Okay,
so that's a great question. I can share what my experience is, and it works well for me. I found that the same way as a medium, that there needs to be an attunement that we have within the spirit world, that also on the other side, that there's an attunement that they're making to attune to us within this human plane of existence.
Okay.
So with that, it's a term that I picked up from the Arthur Findlay College, and it's a term that they refer to as sitting in the power. And so firstly, what I needed to do was to actually ask my guides to reveal themselves. So like people within this human realm, the spirit realm is full of love and support and nurturing. And so the guides would not want to provide a sense of unease. So, they're very much present in our life and very much helping us in ways that we may not be aware of. But when we're ready and we want to, that I think it's important to ask our guides to reveal themselves, to ask our guides to be present in our lives as they are. And I found that how I could then attune and be more present to sense my guides on a personal level was to be able to actually sit in my power, to sit in the power. And I would do that for about 20 to 30 minutes a day. And so as I'm sitting in the power and setting the intention for my guides to draw close, I'm also very much aware that my guides are attuning to my energy. And as they do that, that there'll be a presence of, for me, there was a presence of feeling and knowing and a sensing and an engaging. But I think we can be quite impatient as well through this experience. And I suspect some of us can be quite fortunate. And as we meditate and as we sit and we set the intention, and, many of us may very well be very aware of our guides that are present. And some of us may need the ability to meditate or to sit in the power. But I suspect that setting the intention, well, I know for me that setting the intention has been a really big part of enabling engagement and communication with my guides. So I know that they're with me all the time. I feel them, and I understand that I'm being supported, and at times they're holding my space for me. So the amount of gratitude and love that I give, and the thanks and that I start with when I get up in the morning, for me is a blessing. And I think anyone that is drawn to engaging their guides, or even coming to terms with understanding that a guide may very well exist, I think it's the start of an incredible journey for anyone that can allow themselves to be involved in that way.
And when you talk of sitting in the power, what is that for you? What's going on in your head? What's your intention?
So the sitting in the power for me was an incredible term that I picked up at the Arthur Findlay College. It's a term that some tutors use where it's really about for me, it's about where my solar plexus is and the area around there. And it's about getting in contact with the light within. So what I took from the teachings that was explained to me was I sit within the light that sits within me. So in essence, it's the spirit within. So I sit within that spirit that sits within, and I'm just really present in that place. And as I allow the spirit within me to grow, to get bigger, and for the light to get stronger, what's occurring is my spirit is becoming more present in my physical embodiment. Mm-hmm. And there's a tutor named Jackie Wright, Wright, that has an incredible CD. It's called The Tower, and it talks about embodying that light. And for me, that was a turning point in my mediumship. So when I get up in the morning and I can sit for 20 or 30 minutes and sit in a place where the light, the spirit within me is quite centered, and then that light embodies all of who I am, and then I become the spirit of Phillip. And so as people sit in their own power, they're sitting within the spirit of themselves. And for me, I've discovered that when I sit within the spirit of me, that the decisions I make in my life are governed by a higher self, a higher sense of purpose. And it's been a real powerful experience for me.
It's a really beautiful way to say it. I know I've learned sitting in the power also in my visual, the same thing, like a little light starting in the solar plexus, like extremely bright though, and then just having it grow and grow. And for me, it's a visual, and then just seeing it outside of myself, outside of my skin. And then sometimes having a light, whether it's the sun that I imagine God or the divine kind of blending with my light. And that's the best way I can visualize it for me. But I love how you explained, sitting in, like Philip's soul. That's beautiful. Really nice. Yeah. One more thing. We talk a lot, and we have spoken a lot too about intention. And I remember the first time someone said, just use your intention. I thought, what the heck are you talking about? What does that mean, intention? Can you describe that a little? What does it mean, yes. Intention? Sounds good. But
yes, it does. What intention means for me is, there's the understanding that within this experience, this human experience, which is very real and very important, we exist in a world where we draw to us, the law of attraction. So we draw to us, what we think, what we believe, and what we feel. So like for like. And I've understood that through my mediumistic training, that within the world of spirit, that there's the feeling and the thoughts and the level of consciousness that's experienced in that moment, that's the reality that one exists in. So the word intention for me is about our thoughts manifesting into reality. How does that occur? What does it look like? How can we make that experience become real? So for me, I use the term, I set the intention. So if I get up and I from my heart center express the gratitude and the gratefulness, and I'm so thankful for being alive and breathing and living this experience, I find that what I've done is that I'm in a place of love. From that place of love, I continue to set the intention that I know that what gets drawn to me today is for the greater purpose of my higher good. And I understand that my spirit, the essence of Phillip, will always only provide for me a sense of love and caring for my development. So I put the thought out there, understanding that thought is vibration, thought is frequency. We will manifest and draw to us what we think, not just in this experience, but when we move into the spirit world, the understanding, what little understanding that I've been able to get is that when we communicate with spirit, that it's the level of communication that comes through with the spirit communicator is with such love and such healing that the experience of the intention given from both experiences and both sides really is, for me, the way that we we ideally would live an ideal life in this experience and also the experience when we leave this human embodiment. I think you may be aware that there were some studies done where there was water that was put under a microscope.
Messages in water, yep.
Yeah, and through those studies they established that, by positive thinking, you're able to alter the structure of the shapes that would come out under the microscopes in the glass of water. And I think that's a really good way of validating that the thoughts we have, supported by the intention we set, can determine how our life gets lived out and what we draw to us.
I have a comment on the messages in water. Before my dad died, I had watched one of the videos about the messages in water, and there was a study done in Japan, a project, and I can't remember the doctor's name that created all this, but he asked people throughout Japan to boil one pot of rice and to divide half of it into two different glass jars, and one glass jar be set in one room and the other glass jar be set in another room. And for, I think it was a period of a month, to go into one room and talk to the rice, love the rice, positive words to the rice, positive thoughts around the rice, and then in the other room, negative thoughts, negative words, negative feelings. And after a month, the rice that was loved and with the positive thoughts, actually, when they opened the jar, had a golden color, smelled nutty, and the other jar in the other room, it turned black with a foul odor. And what a great demonstration for the lives of many people. Even you can Google some pictures of this to see how important it is to have positive thoughts, positive words, love, gratitude, speaking positively, as opposed to going the other world of the negativity. But I love that.
It's an incredible example. Mm-hmm. And I think that in terms of how we live this life, all the thoughts that we imagine, actually, not only do we create, but if the example that you've given, and we draw that to what sits within our human embodiment. So the thoughts that we have, that the constant repetition of negative thought patterns, or the constant repetition of harmful words that people have really directed towards us. And as we take that on, imagining what we manifest, that not only sits in our body that we're not aware of, but also the life that we keep drawing into us. And for me, it was making those realizations that throughout this last 2 years of this this journey, that I've been really able to understand. Well, if I constantly set the intention that everything that's drawn to me is for the greater and higher purpose of my soul's development, that I know that I journeyed through this life and I came here to have this human experience, to live an incredible, joyful, happy life, and to share and to love and to give and to care. And so if I surround myself with those thoughts and I embody those thoughts, I know that everything I do in my life and everybody that I meet in my life, that I do in a way that is for the greater purpose of my development and this experience. And I say that with a passion because, I know that we can grow up with families that, unknowingly might create a lot of dysfunction, or unknowingly might create a lot of behaviour or patterns that we get exposed to that really are not in the best interest of us.
Right.
And I think that as we get older, we can lose sight of, I think some patterns may have served a purpose when we were younger and it's enabled us to survive. And I think as adults that we may very well carry some of those patterns. And one of the ways that I discovered for me to sort of better my life was setting the intention and of drawing things through love and forgiveness that gets drawn to me, that some of those patterns can also dissolve. Some of those patterns can be broken away. That will enable me to have experiences that will involve me sitting in my truth. And I have to grab a quote from Oprah. Sorry, it's one that sticks in my head.
No problem.
But she often says, if it doesn't feel right, then, it may very well be nudging you back onto your path. So instead of sitting in that place of what doesn't feel right and rationalizing the experience as, well, it doesn't feel right and this is what's normal, this is what I'm used to, maybe that doesn't feel right, as Oprah eloquently puts it, is about being nudged back onto the right path for why you're here. Yeah.
Have you always been so positive? Here's the thing. This all sounds great. And you sound very peaceful and positive and have the gratitude. But have you ever had the battle with the negative mind that it actually took something to put in habits or put in practices that you can practice intention every day, or made a note for yourself that first thing I'll be grateful? Because I know, for me, keeping this show going and talking to people like yourself, that puts me back in a great place. Like, oh yes, I forgot about this. But left to my own devices, sometimes it's not so easy to remember gratitude and intention and those things. Did you have to overcome something, or was this?
No, look, great question. So I grew up with a family. There were 9 siblings, so 9 brothers and sisters.
Big family.
So it's a big family, and Mum and Dad had migrated from the Middle East. So we came to an incredible. Well, I was born in Australia, but Mum and Dad had migrated from the Middle East to Australia. So with that, there was poverty, which wasn't uncommon with really large families that had come to a new country. But also for me, quite personally, there was I had rheumatoid arthritis as a child at 8 or 9 years old, and I was confined to a wheelchair. And so for about a year of my life, I wasn't able to get around. And really, through the power of prayer back then, there was a real shift. And by the time I was about 10, whereas I was a very sick child for a couple of years, so I remember feeling quite lost within that process. So, and having had experiences where, not being told positive statements for a large part of my life, being, almost feeling that I was a square peg, being pushed into a circle,
right?
And at periods in my life, I suspect feeling quite awkward. So I found that, no, I wasn't always a very positive person, and I can sit here today and draw upon the life that I live today, where I am positive and I do live my life through intention. Really came from a place, for me would be a dark place, a place of where I'd felt quite sad and quite alone. Although grown up with, a very large family, with that also came a sense of, how do I fit? Where do I fit? Mm-hmm. How do I make sense of experiences that I really can't put words to? And so that sense of aloneness was something that resonated quite a lot. And then when I became sick, and I was unwell and confined to a wheelchair, I understand now, looking back, that the love and through the power of prayer that was received, and prayer is about intention for me. So I have a different understanding today as an adult as well, that prayer is intention. And with that intention can really change and alter really everything within this human experience. So I look back to the experiences through my childhood. I look back through the experiences where that sense of aloneness was very, very apparent for me. And as I've grown and worked through some, having gone into counselling, worked through some patterns, some self-destructive patterns as well, that, I would behave in a way that wasn't for the best interest of Phillip. I can look back now and say that those experiences, the real sense of being alone, being isolated, being misunderstood, feeling awkward, feeling depressed at times as well, if I didn't have those experiences, that I wouldn't be able to sit here today in such an expression of gratitude, such an expression of love and forgiveness and caring. Because for me, I think that as we journey through this life, it's almost as though we sit in a place of opposites. That how do I know how to experience love if I haven't experienced hate? How do I experience gratitude, forgiveness, and kindness if I haven't experienced, a sense of hurt and harm? So I never was able to put the two and two together to make sense of it. But now in my life today I can. And it's from that place that I can draw a sense of gratitude, a sense of kindness, a sense of love. And truthfully, I would rather embody love, kindness, forgiveness, and joy than through choice, though, than being stuck in a place where I was not sure if I was going to get through that next day.
Yes.
Not sure, what I meant, what these experiences that I was feeling very alone with meant. But it's really important to reach out. I look back now and I think to myself, I needed to call, for example, a friend, or I needed to call a helpline, or I needed to go see a counsellor. If the part of the part of me inside, the spirit within Phillip, had this yearning to live. The guides that would draw close to me, that I now know were the guides supporting and loving me, were providing me with a direction to make that phone call, to reach out, to speak to a counsellor, to reach out and get support of family or friends. So, for me, I can't emphasise the importance enough of actually reaching out, because we do need people in our life to mirror a sense of value. Because we're not here to journey through this life alone, in my opinion.
No.
We need other people, and we're worthy of other people. We're worthy of engagement. We're worthy of love.
Yes.
And we forget that sometimes.
Well, thank you, because I'm glad I asked that question, because you are an inspiration now, and to know that it's possible to wake up and have intention and have gratitude and choose love. It's all very powerful to hear. Our time is just about up, my friend.
Yeah.
Let me just ask, it happens regularly that some of the listeners may choose to get in touch with you. Could you just describe a little bit about what you do? I mean, certainly medium readings on people, but can you work with people on attunement, and just maybe describe a little of your services? Grief counseling, anything?
Yeah.
Share.
So what I do is that so in essence, what I offer is I offer spiritual intuitive counselling. And so what that means is, yes, I work as a psychic medium, and that's very important, because I think, well, I know that it's important to understand for many people that experience loss in their life, and I mean loss in terms of family members that pass, to understand that we don't die, that there is evidence that a medium can bring forth that will be able to validate that mum, dad, brother, sister, our loved ones are still very much with us. So understanding the importance of the mediumistic engagement, and also working with attunement. So the psychic faculties that many of us have, but that I tune to be very much to work with, I'm able to then not just provide evidence, but actually attune and connect to the people that are present, that need support, or that choose to source support and love. But what I understood was that through the psychic faculties and attuning with someone's auric field, that at times providing evidence to a loved family member, that our family member or a friend or our loved one is still very much present in our life, can put us into a place where we're quite emotional. And I've discovered that if there can be a level of support that can be offered during what in essence is a mediumship reading, it can then be framed as counselling. So I found that through some psychotherapy that I've done in the past, in which was Gestalt psychotherapy, I understood that if I put the three together, the mediumistic abilities and the training that I'm currently going through, and put through the psychic faculties that I'm attuning to, my understanding of working with frequency and how we all sit within a vibrational resonance and work with energy, that then when someone is sitting and they're engaging spirit, that we can also provide grief counselling, that I can also provide love, I'm able to frame it in a way that when they leave that experience, that there's a level of self-care. So what becomes very apparent to me is that when someone's providing a mediumship reading, or when I'm doing a mediumistic reading, that the person who's sitting in front of me, their heart chakra will open, and it will open in such a phenomenal way that they're not only really receptive to their loved ones, but they're also, in a way, quite vulnerable to then go out and engage all the other human senses that can be quite alert as well. So I find that if I can help support and balance their chakras in a way that can create a harmonic experience, so that's quite an experience of them feeling contained, and also if there's some grief that presents itself, provide a framework that they feel supported within that moment.
Excellent.
I find that they're then leaving that experience quite safe, because I think I know for me personally that when I've gone through moments of grief, that I can be quite vulnerable. And I think there's a responsibility from a counselling perspective. I'm not suggesting a mediumistic, but from a counselling perspective, that the person that you're sitting with leaves in a very safe place. And I feel blessed to be able to sort of put the three together and offer it as a service. Really it provides a space for healing.
Well, and after spending this hour with you, you really do seem genuine and caring and loving, and it'd be safe to have a conversation with you, for sure. Thank you for that. Phillip Kayrouz has been our guest. And to reach you, the best way is to email you, correct?
That's correct. Yep. All through Skype. The
Happy Spirit Mediums, with an S, at outlook.com. Or go to WeDon'tDieRadio.com, click on episode 135, and there's a link to directly email the fabulous Phillip. Phillip, thank you. Any final words or?
Just a very big thank you from this end.
Sure.
I do have to say to your listeners, if you have not been to Australia, you must come to Australia. We have the incredible Uluru, and it's the Earth's, one of the Earth's chakras. It's a solar plexus, and I'm not going to be a true Aussie if I don't end this conversation with actually bringing to everyone's attention how incredible Australia is. And there's a lot of healing that occurs here, and I just really think if you can get yourself to Australia and come to Uluru and feel the enormous energy that sits within this incredible rock that the Aboriginals have been the caretaker of for thousands of years, I think it would be an incredible experience for your listeners to come and have.
How do you spell Uluru?
Aussie me, sorry.
How do you spell Uluru?
So Uluru is Uluru, and it's a solar plexus, the Earth solar plexus, the Earth chakra, sorry. And the global function is to maintain the vitality of Earth and all of its living species.
Well, that's a definite reason to go. I haven't been yet. My aunt just returned from Australia. I will. I promise. Yeah. I promise. Well, thanks. Thank you. And to our listener, thank you for listening. And if you have an opportunity to go to iTunes, there's a place where you can rate this show, and it would do me a favor if you wouldn't mind. And I'll take your honest opinions. But iTunes is very picky as to who they put on their lists and things, and it helps to have some good ratings. So if you have a minute, just go to iTunes and look for We Don't Die and rate the show however you would, and that would make a big difference for me. So in closing, this is Sandra Champlain. I've been your host on We Don't Die Radio. We have been talking to Phillip Kayrouz from Sydney, Australia, who left me with some things I wrote down. Being stuck means a new discovery is to come. That's good news. Nothing comes too late. Miracles happen. And remember to set your intention and make it a great day. So I want to thank you for listening, and we'll see you soon.